everybody. I can see everybody's still arriving, but this is our HarperFiction Presents Masterclass. It's the first one, and it's called A Book, So What Is Next? Really excited to be this with our first ever guest, Madeleine Milburn. She is from Madeleine Milburn TV and agency, and will be introducing herself in a little bit. Firstly, I just want to introduce myself. So my name is Kimberley Young. I am executive publisher of HarperFiction. HarperFiction comprises of the crime and thriller list, the general fiction list, the prestigious Harper Voyager science and fantasy literary imprint, the Borough Press, and the literary estates of J.R. Tolkien and Agatha Christie. I'm also the executive publisher of One More Chapter, which is a digital first list. I also personally edit a roster of authors. I'm not going to name all of them right now, but to name a few, there's #1 bestsellers, Lucy Foley, Fern Britton, Kimberly Chambers, and authors that are out right now, Dawn Porter and Emma Gannon. I'm so happy, partly because I get to see her, that I'm in the virtual room with Madeleine Milburn. Maddie and I have worked together for a long time, but I will let Maddie introduce herself and her agency.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here and amazing to be able to reach out to so many people in this new virtual world that we're in. But yeah, I just wanted to introduce the agency, which I'm in at the moment. But yeah, I started the Madeleine Milburn agency back in 2012, and I actually started in a small basement flat in Angel, in a cupboard really, and I was there for months just working away, and it actually felt a bit like lockdown. But now we've grown into this incredible global agency with this huge reach, and we have 6 primary agents now. I'll just go through them quickly because you may think about submitting to them, but there's Giles Milburn, who handles historical fiction. There's Catherine Cho, who handles more literary fiction and non-fiction. Hayley Steed, who's at the commercial end of the list. And then we've got Alice Sutherland-Hawes, who does children's and YA, and Chloe Seeger, who also does children's and YA. And then there's me, and my list is kind of evolving into this literary commercial sweet spot. I go for very character-driven books, and I think the names that you'll be familiar with, or some of you will, are Gail Honeyman, and then there's Elizabeth McNeil, who does historical fiction. We've got authors such as C.J. Tudor, C.L. Taylor, Beth Morrey, Holly Bourne, so many authors, and I hope you've read some of them. But it's a real honour to be here to talk about the whole publishing process and what it is to be an agent.
And I think that's what you just said, Maddie, is really important, that part of the reason we wanted to do HarperFiction Presents and these masterclasses and sort of behind the scenes is really to make sure that I as a publisher and Maddie as an agent, you know, there's no veil between us and you as a writer. You know, the reason I get up in the morning is to discover new talent. I think that's something that really bonds publisher and agent, and we have very different roles in the process. So we sort of wanted to talk through a little bit, firstly about the roles we play, some of the questions we often get answered, and then as a lot of you signed up, a lot of you asked questions, so we'll try and cover those off in our general chat, but I do have a list of those questions at the end, which we will do our best to cover off. We'll be here for about 30 to 40 minutes. The chat will then be recorded and put on the HarperFiction Presents YouTube channel, so you can go and rewatch us if you like, when that is. So Maddie, do you just sort of firstly want to explain what a role of an agent is?
Yeah, of course. An agent, I mean, we have so many different hats, but primarily, you know, first off, we are talent spotters, and we'll be looking at the market for certain trends, but also, I mean, I look for voice-driven fiction and different interesting characters. So it will be finding the talent, and then we work so closely with our authors to get them the best publishers, not just in the UK, but in the US and all the international markets. So we're a global agency. And then, you know, we will make the book, we will create the buzz around the book, the manuscript they're about to submit. I will carefully select editors, in the UK, in the US. I want to find the perfect match for the author, and then I'll submit the manuscript and hopefully get a lot of offers and go to auction and find the best homes. And then after that, I mean, that's really just the beginning of the journey. Then we're the author's champion, we're their cheerleader. We help them edit their work, we brainstorm with them, we find them all of the opportunities for their book. We want to make sure that it's going to be published in digital, in audio. We want to option it for film and TV rights. We're there to solve problems, to navigate the journey with them. So yeah, there's so many different things, and we'll talk more. And I think, Kim, if you talk about your role, then I can expand on my role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of interesting points that you make there. I suppose my role as a publisher, and I think, as I said before, HarperFiction is comprised up of lots of different imprints and different areas, and there are then different editors that specialise, and that specialism is quite an interesting angle. And I think a lot of the time when people ask or call us the gatekeepers of this industry, I think one of the huge benefits of working with an agent, and with both of my hats on as publishers, I see both agented material, and some of my editors do accept unagented material, but the big huge benefit of working with an agent is they do understand your tastes and parts. I mean, Maddie, you and I have worked together for a long time. You understand what I'm looking for. We'll have conversations about some of those trends in the market. And for writers out there, and I think this is something that came up quite a lot in the questions, I'm at the moment, and the publishers and editors I work with are looking for really our programs in 2022 and 23 at the moment, because we work with a lot of authors day to day on multi-book contracts. So the new talent we're looking for has to fit around the authors and publishing contracts we already have in place, because obviously they're our first priority. Our publishing around those authors has to come first, and then we look to add new voices to the list around that. So that's why we work with agents, because they help us curate and they help us narrow down what we're looking for depending on our specific specialisms. Would you say that? And I think that's it with you, Maddie. I suppose you work with several publishers at the same time. So how do you decide which editor to send a particular script to?
Yeah, well, well, now we're having Zoom calls all the time, but we used to have lots of meetings to catch up and, to hear about their taste and what they're publishing next and what they're looking for. So I have an idea when I read a manuscript, oh, I think that's going to be for this particular editor. She's just told me she wants something like that. And we get a real sense of their taste and what they're after. And yeah, I think with editors, I have a big list, but it's really, I submit to kind of a big group of editors. And then it's really interesting to see what the editor's vision is for that particular book. So I don't assume that any editor is going to love it more than another. I want to see how they connect with the actual writing and how the chemistry is with that author. So that's why I like going to auction and arranging these meetings so they can actually meet the prospective publishing teams and to see who really fits with each other. So yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting thing, because quite often agents, and Maddie, your agency is brilliant for doing this. You do work with the author quite often editorially before you connect with an editor, but that doesn't mean that the editorial journey is finished. So each editor will have a slightly different way they want to connect that material to a particular readership, and therefore might want to sort of pull out one element more so that they can help with what we call the positioning of the book. So that might then be and I can actually see Beth Morrie's book, which one of my HarperCollins do publish it. One of our brilliant editorial directors, Martha Ashby, was the editor, and it might come in with a slightly different title. And if you see how that book is packaged in the UK versus the US, it shows that those editors and those markets will bring out slightly different elements of the storytelling in the way to connect it with a different readership. And I think the edits you then work with on an author, and why it's so important that you meet with the author and check that your vision of the book and how that author might take it to the next level is the same, because quite often it might be different. You know, an editor might have a more commercial bent and an author will feel that their work is more literary, or there's so many different permutations, and that's why those relationships, certainly as an editor, and I'd be interested, Maddie, you know, we always say we look for a voice, and certainly in my list, we look for authors we can work with for book after book and career. You know, we want to build brands of the future as well as have great commercial success with a particular book. So finding that perfect relationship of an author that you can work with and feel that you can bring their creative best out of them, and have an agent that can help you facilitate that. That's sort of when magic really happens.
It really is. It's the real magic when you've got the shared vision between the publisher and the author. And you know, I know from way back, mistakes in my past have been matching up the author with the wrong publisher who has a different vision for the book, and it's always been a battle. But now, you know, over the last few years, and I think that's why we have these big global successes, is because they have, you know, they're matched with the right person, and we all share this united vision. And I think as an agent, we do editorial work. I always say we try to get, you know, the manuscript comes in at this level, the agent will take it to this level, the publisher will take it to that level. We get it to the level, we work structurally, we work on character, we do a lot of cutting and weeding. I always think, you know, some sentences are so long and just, you can speed up the pace here. We do all that to get it into shape so we can submit simultaneously to the UK, the US and international markets. And I think, you know, if we didn't do that editorial work, I'd probably just submit to a UK editor, and then they could work on it, and then, or maybe have world rights. But we don't like to do it like that. We want it to be a book that lots of publishers go for at the outset, and then they can all launch together.
I think that's a trade secret you might be giving away there, Maddie. But I think you're absolutely right, and I think just to tell you a little bit about the internal process, publishing process, and I think why it's so important that an agent and author do that level of work, is if a script is taken, say, to me to an acquisition meeting, there might be up to 40 people in the room that I have to persuade, with all of the submissions, all of the work we've got on, for people to read and to support with a financial investment to take that author on board. So if you sort of say, oh look, I promise this book's really good, but please just wade through the first 100 pages. I know there's, you know, the pace isn't great, but it does get better, or just wait till the end, there's a great twist. It doesn't really persuade people to drop their workloads. And actually a lot of the reading we do is at night. You probably can hear my dog barking right now. The dog will be calling me out to go for a walk. You know, it doesn't stop me. I've got my Kindle here on hand. I've got a submission to read tonight. If I have to wade through 100 pages of something, my dog will probably win out. So that's why I think it is so important. It's really about that internal process, how we get attention, and of course we take on storytellers that need shaping. That's our job. But equally, we need to persuade a team of people that they need to get on board. So sometimes that amount of work a script does need might affect the initial support you might get in-house, from the marketing team, from the sales team. You know, people want to get inspired to write in your book, and get inspired to work, you know, and invest their time in a book, and that just might change how you can bring it to market and the speed of which. I think that's quite a bit about some of the internal process, at least. And I suppose the other question I had, Maddie, on that, and the way you and I work together, is obviously we bring new talent into the business, but is there a difference in how you might work with a writer? And I know we've got a lot of new writers listening this evening, but how you might work on an author's first book with them compared to their 10th book? What might the difference be there?
Do you mean editorially, or in
both editorially, and how that role of agent might change between that initial deal and then what your role is on the 10th book?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as once we're always looking ahead, as you are as well in publishing. Once we've done the first deal, I'm already thinking, when are we going to do the next deal? And it will probably be, hopefully, around the time they deliver book 2, and that's been accepted. But so with book 2, we are working quite closely, especially on the idea if it hasn't been fully formed when we're submitting book 1. So that second book, we're brainstorming, and we're going through lots of different versions, and the editor will get involved at that stage as well. And then once that's been delivered and accepted, we'll be thinking about the new deal to get the best contract for the third book. And we're constantly thinking about kind of shaping that author's career and where's it going, and did the first book work really well in the market. And this is all very collaborative with the publisher. If the book has done really badly, and you know, never with HarperCollins, but if something's happened and the you know, the pairing hasn't been quite right, we might look to kind of move to another publisher and kind of relaunch under a different identity, or the author might want to change genre. But generally what we want to do is grow an author with their publisher and, you know, book in, book out, really build the brand together. And that is what we aim. And that's my, you know, my big purpose, I think, is to do that. But we're there, you know, every step of every book that my authors deliver, I will read, I will give my reaction. I think when it's under contract, I probably wouldn't go into as much depth editorially, because they have their editor who, you know, it can sometimes clash if there's too many cooks. And also you're not just going to have the UK editor, you might have the US editor as well, so they're going to get lots of notes. So, but I will definitely give it the first read, give my reaction. If there's something really big that I think needs to be fixed, we'll do that before sending it to the editor. But yeah, the editor will be ready and waiting for that second or third or fourth book, and then they'll start working editorially.
And I think for me as a publisher, and it's really interesting you talk about that collaboration, because I think obviously when times are good, things carry on, but actually, you know, publishing, and I think people don't necessarily, new writers, and you don't necessarily want to talk about the scale of when things don't work. Quite often all people hear is success stories, but generally each publishing career is so different, and things can start off in a really small way, and an author might only find their feet and their audience on book 5 or 6, and that's great, because if they're slowly growing, it could be that they start off well, and then actually then it's a real struggle to find a new audience. There's so many different career paths, and I think as a new writer, it's about finding your voice, finding the right agent, and finding the right editor. And sometimes that's not going to work straight away. It is a long process. And as we talked about, the actual editorial process between submitting, you know, writing your novel, which can take months, it can take years, it can take a long decades, and then finding the agent, to taking it to the publisher, and then, as I said, it could take 2 to 3 years to publish the book. And there are different routes, and we do try and publish some books more quickly than others. So I suppose the question out of that I've got for you, Maddie, and the bit that I probably don't know, is if I was a writer now, so for those writers listening to us now, how do they go about finding the right agent to represent their work?
Yeah, so it's doing the research, I think, like really, I do think the Writers and Artists Yearbook is an excellent resource, because it's updated every year, and there's a lot of stuff online that's actually quite out of date. So you've got all the right details. You can basically go through each agency, look them up, look up their website, research the agent, follow them on Twitter, go onto Facebook, find where they are, where they're, making noise. Subscribe to the bookseller, I think, which is a good piece of advice for seeing which agents are doing the deals at the time, and what you can find out, because everybody announces like the big deals, and you can find out their taste from that. But I think it's just really, and looking at the back, the acknowledgements in the backs of books, in the area that you're writing. You can find agent names there, but do your research. I think that's really key, because I think we get about 80 submissions a day at the moment, and some of the submissions that I get, they're not something that I would be able to represent, and it's such a shame, because it's like they're going to feel that they're rejected by me, but I'm not rejecting them. It's just not my area of expertise. They haven't really thought carefully enough about what I. And so I do think, do your research.
I think that's a really, really good piece of advice. And I certainly, even as an editor, I look at the deals that are being made and which agents might, have a similar taste to me. And similarly, sometimes I can scour Twitter, and I know other editors do. And if they see an agent sign up an author, we then quickly go, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'm really looking for historical books at the moment, or some such. So I think Twitter's a really good place. And as you say, the bookseller, I think we're always looking for new talent, and I think that's something that can feel very far away when you're writing a story, maybe during lockdown, or you've just started on the process. I can see why, certainly my background, I had no idea that you could even be an editor. It was really by luck I fell into my editorial journey. I started, I thought I was going to be a journalist, and sort of ended up going to London for a little bit and saw a job at Mills and Boon, and I thought, oh my god, I used to read Mills and Boon under my grandmother's kitchen table, and it's like, god, I didn't know you could work, I didn't know you could edit books, and suddenly realized I could get paid to read, and it was amazing. So I do understand how daunting it must feel from the outside in, and as I said, that's part of why, and thank you for coming to join me to do this, that we want to do this, because there are now, I went to a local library when I was going for my job interview, and Mills and Boon didn't have a website then, it was under construction. So now there's Twitter, there is a lot of conflicting advice. I appreciate that, but do you ever do sort of Twitter call outs with your agency or that sort of thing? What would happen if someone approached you on Twitter? Like what's the best way for them to use Twitter in that way?
Yeah, we do. Well, there's the Ask Agent channel that agents get involved with answering questions and things. I do get some direct tweets, which I respond to. But I think generally, I mean, it's difficult with it's kind of thing with Twitter in terms of actually engaging back and forth. I think with most social media accounts, sometimes I give a big push, and then sometimes I don't. But
yeah, it's just keeping an eye. So if you're doing a hashtag ask, is it hashtag ask agent?
Ask agent, yeah.
I try and do a hashtag ask editor, and I know a lot of editors at HarperFiction do as well. But
you're right. When we've started this mentorship that I think we're trying to invite, I started the agency. I wanted to be really transparent, because I remember when I first started out, as in a very old school literary agency, the beginning of my career, they call it, the slush pile. It would be there and nobody read it. It was all recommendations, word of mouth. It was friends of friends, and I was so horrified. And I would be the assistant having to stamp the card saying, sorry, but your work's rejected. And I was like, but nobody's read this. And I just thought that was so awful and disappointing. So now, I mean, my whole list has been made from my submissions pile, I call it, not slush, because there's amazing talent in there. And that's where I find everything, and we are looking. So I think really it's important that writers are presenting their work in the best way possible, that they're really thinking about their title, they're only submitting one manuscript at once. Like sometimes I get all these attachments with loads of different things, and I think I'm going to be interested in all your work if I love the one book that you're presenting to me. Just present one, but really honing that pitch, showing that there's a really exciting hook to the manuscript, to the story, talking about the actual story rather than just the themes. So being very specific, being concise about it, and then your author profile. It doesn't need to be very long, but put that towards the end of the submission letter rather than at the beginning, because I think we'll be interested in everything about you if we're really interested in the book that you're submitting. But I don't know.
Is that the tip? Just story first, and then
story first, yeah.
That's really interesting. As a publisher, so I obviously, when I see a Maddie Milburn, you always do a really good teasing email first, but when I see a Maddie Milburn sort of submission in my inbox, I always go straight to the text, the first page, and then read the submission letter after, because I want to know first and foremost whether I can connect with the material. But that's because I know you will only send me something that you have really thought about, whether that's something that might be right for the list, or and we've worked together for a long time. And but I love just getting straight into those first few pages, which I do think it's really interesting. You say when someone has committed so much time and energy to writing a book, thinking and spending a little bit of that time just thinking about how they presented, and especially those first pages of, or the first chapter, it really surprises me sometimes that people don't put more of their time and energy into that part of it. So I think that's a really great tip about story first, because that's certainly for me, if I'm pulled in to those first few pages, then I'll go and have a look at the pitch and go, okay, right, I'm going to try and drop everything now and read this because I love the material. So how many submissions, you said your agency are receiving, how many?
I was saying about 80 a day. During lockdown, it's really increased. But we're all on the submissions account. It's a joint account. So all the agents, and then we've got 2 external readers. So if there's anything that we think is going to be, we're going to take interest in, we will make sure that it gets to the right person, and we'll be reading. But that's the thing. In the past, I was able to open and read all those chapters, but now I can't read. That would be like reading a few manuscripts a day. So I have to be taken by that pitch, and I think saying like the comp titles, you've got to have an idea about where your book sits, and that's even better than those books. But you need to choose those authors carefully, and just don't share so much work at once. Just share your main manuscript. There's a lot online. There's a lot of advice now, I think. Going to the festivals as well, the York Writing Festival, Winchester. You can meet agents there as well. So I think there are a lot of resources available. Than there were a few years ago.
This is something I think I get asked a lot, and it was in the questions, and I will come on to the questions. We've got about 10 minutes to go, so I do want to make sure we cover some of those. But people who have been published before, either self-published or they've been independently published, would that be a bonus, or would it be off-putting to you as an agent?
No, I mean, I've relaunched or taken on authors who are self-published. I look for self-published authors that are doing well. That's really attractive to me, because writing, you have to hone your craft, and it might take 3 or 4 books to do that. And so getting a writer when they've written 4 books behind them, that's brilliant from my point of view. And that's what I was going to talk to you, Kim, as well about. It is so hard at the moment launching with a traditional publisher. The market space is really crammed. It's jammed. There's so many books. I was going to ask you how many you publish a month, but there are so many that sometimes the digital route first is a great way to start with those, and quite a few of my authors stay in that route. It's very lucrative. So, and there's less snobbery about digital now as well.
I totally agree, Maddie, and I think that's part of my job as a publisher too, and why I have the 2 hats, and why I mentioned sort of in my introduction. So yes, I'm a publisher of the traditional list and oversee the publishing there, but also the digital first list. And I feel that a job, taking away my publishing hat, but as an editor, is figuring out how I can connect the best story with the widest possible readership. And sometimes that widest possible readership is in digital. It might be in audio, it might be in hardcover through Waterstones, it might be through a supermarket channel. And each writer and each story and each year, how you can connect the right story with the widest possible readership might change. At the start of my career, supermarkets had only just started really taking on paperbacks, and women's fiction was absolutely flourishing because suddenly people were buying, their paperbacks in Tesco in a way they weren't before. Over the last years, breaking debuts through Waterstones and through some of the independent shops has been fantastic, the way that they have helped nurture careers. But equally, the digital channels, you can reach huge volumes of readers. So I have never been a format snob, because for me it's about connecting a story with the widest possible readership. And you're right, some of those traditional channels, and I think especially during lockdown, I massively want to support independents and Waterstones, and they've been fantastic during lockdown. But of course, digital and audio formats have also really, really flourished. And I certainly, like you say, the more people can practice their craft, the better. And sometimes that is spending many years on one novel, especially possibly at the literary end, really thinking about the soul of you as a writer and what you want to write. Equally, writing and finding live what readers love about your writing and your storytelling, and either working with a publisher or we still have the traditional agent, publisher and digital imprint, is fantastic. And I think you can really learn about that through the reader feedback you get and just the practice of writing more and more books. So I'm like you, Maddie. I think whatever it takes to perfect your writing skills and to reach readers, if you can do that in the meantime, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and it also gives you, if you go down the self-publishing route, it gives you a really kind of real insight into how to publish and all of the things that work well, digital promotions and how Amazon works. And, some of my digitally published authors, self-published authors that I now represent, they're so savvy. And it's such a great partnership because we can really explore each opportunity together and work out what's going to be best for them. But, if we have a number of like digitally published authors, like Fiona Velpe, for instance, with Amazon Publishing. And we've sold her international rights to 20 different traditional publishers. So she's published in print in other countries, but in the UK in digital. But also we've got to remember that digital, they've got print on demand, and those editions now look very, they're almost the same as traditionally published print books.
Absolutely.
And during lockdown, people have been ordering them like anything because they wouldn't know that the first format was digital. So.
Well, we definitely say it's digital first, not digital only. I think that's in the One More Chapter. Yeah. That's all been our sort of mantra. So I think we've got a few minutes left. So we've got some really great questions here. So I'm just going to, if you excuse me, read my piece of paper. And actually this came up quite a lot, but I'm just going to pick out this one from Danny, who said, how would you advise protecting your work when submitting to agents and or publishers? Are there any precautions one should take? And that actually question was asked quite a few times. I'm assuming people are meaning about copyright protection there. How do you protect? Would you worry about that
It's our job to protect your work, so I don't think you need to worry when you submit to an agent. Because
I would definitely say the same with a publisher. We also work under, especially with the GDPR guidelines now, we destroy any work, any addresses if we don't acquire that script. We're long from the days, as Maddie said, where things used to sit in cupboard for a year. So we are very, very protective over ideas, and it's our profession is again to find the talent, and an author's work is really precious to us. So I think you should feel quite safe. I think submitting to both agent and publisher. I hope that answers the question. It did come up quite a few times, and it was in the same way. I think the thing also that came down was about following trends, and I know we picked on this a little bit, Maddie, and as I said, and again, I think this is where it is interesting now that we've got digital as well as traditional lists, that whilst on the traditional list it does take longer to maybe get to market, so we're probably looking at 22. There are some books we might buy now for the end of 21. But with digital, you can get to market quicker. But a lot of people, especially around lockdown, are saying, is lockdown going to be a trend? Like, what's the next trend? Should they write to the trend they think is going on now? So what would your advice be?
My author's already asking me, do I need to include lockdown and COVID and everything in my book, and should it play a part? And I am actually just saying no, I don't think you should. I think with non-fiction maybe something completely different, but with fiction I wouldn't, because I think by the time the book's published, it might feel very dated in 2 years' time. I hope it will feel dated that we're beyond this awful episode in history. But in terms of trends, it's really hard because I'm always looking for new trends. So you can jump on a trend, but you've got to be very quick about it. So it's all to do with timing. And I think, like the psychological suspense trend has been going on and on and on, but it has to be so different and so original. But I would really focus more on your character. You know, as a character, I think, for me, that sells a book, the strength of your character. And also maybe doing something different with the genres. So I was just going to mention, Kim, the big book that I sold during lockdown was called The Maid by a Canadian author. But that was so different because it was like a blend of Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. It had a really quirky protagonist, crossed with an Agatha Christie murder mystery. So it was this combination. It was like starting, and it was uplifting. So there's all those things, those elements. But it really was the voice. It was that central character that struck me. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to trends. I think it. But what would you say, Kim?
I would totally agree, and I think exactly what you said. I think The Maid is such a brilliant example. HarperFiction were very lucky in winning that auction, fiercely competed auction, but it was exactly that. When it came in, it felt like, and this is when I have what I call my like publishing tingle, which sounds a bit weird, but it just felt like something I hadn't read before. And it was the same when I first read Eleanor Oliphant. I could say to everybody, can you just please stop what you're doing now? You honestly won't have read anything like this book. And that is when I think you get really excited as a publisher, because we read, and I think again people forget, reading for me, like a good writer comes from good reading. I read everything and anything, whether it's the back of a cereal packet to, and although I personally mainly acquire fiction, I have recently just acquired a non-fiction project, but I read non-fiction, I read everything, newspapers, magazines. I feel like I have to be a magpie so I understand the world into which I'm publishing these stories into. So The Maid was really exciting because it felt for me like something I hadn't read before, but also it felt quite timeless. So whether we were going to publish in 22 or 21, and actually we are publishing in 2020. See, I forget what year I'm in. That's how far ahead we usually plan. My head's always like 2 years down the road. So when people sort of say, "Oh, this is the current publishing trend, so you're going to love it," that, I think it can work when you follow fast and you're publishing in a certain way. But actually, what we're really looking for is, something I've never feel as though I've read before. And I love, I published Lucy Foley's book a couple of years ago, The Hunting Party, or last year. So I really don't know what year I'm in. And that was it. It was just so exciting because it was sort of like a new contemporary take on a murder mystery. And it's just really exciting to publish something. And that's what I think a storyteller, and I think Maddie, you and I think, Maddie, you were the first agent I ever bought a book from. And I feel, when you've got a voice, and I believe I actually said that to you, and I don't know how many years ago, 10, 15 years ago now, that when you can take a cover off a book and know who's written it, then you've got a really unique voice. And I think when people say, what's a unique voice mean? That's what I feel. You should be able to really just think, God, this is unlike anybody I've read. A bit like when you hear a singer, I think a really true classic singer has such a unique quality to their voice. It's not karaoke, and I think that's what I'm always looking for, whether it's overly descriptive or it's really funny, or it's just find out what your special quality is and then really go to town on it and put that through. As Maddie said, it's your characters and the story you choose to put them in. So for me, it doesn't matter whether it's a different world or it's a different time, or if it's a different crime. That's where I see a unique voice in the story, and how you create those characters.
It's so true, Kim, because I mean, we go for similar books, definitely. But it is about that voice, and I will look at any genre. And I flit around from different, I go from crime and thriller, and people, oh, you're doing crime and thrillers now. I'm like, well, no, I'm doing historical, and then I'm going to contemporary, and then I'm going to, it depends on that voice. And it is the characters. Like, we always remember the characters with big global blockbuster, bestsellers. You remember Harry Potter, you remember Romeo and Juliet, you remember Jack Reacher, you remember Eleanor Oliphant. You remember the character, you don't remember the storyline. Well, I don't, going way back, the story and the plot and all those things and the trend and the genre, but you remember those characters. So work on that, I think. Make that character that people can relate to and empathize with. think that's a really, really key.
That's a really great idea. And one question I've got here from Michelle, and actually I don't know the answer to this, so this is a really good one for me, but it says, if you're a multi-genre author, say thriller, non-fiction and children's book as an example, is it best to find an agency that covers all three genres, or would you have a multiple agent within the agency, multiple agents?
Well, I can't speak for other agencies, but here we like to manage the entire author career. It's much easier that way, you know, especially if they're going to be writing adult fiction and YA fiction, like Polly Bourne, for instance. She writes both, one's published by YA publisher and one by an adult fiction publisher. And so it's much easier that we represent all the work by an author. And here we have got, you know, if you want to write middle grade alongside adult fiction, we have got a specialist middle grade agent who would help with that. But your primary agent would always kind of be the leader and steer your career and champion you, but then might work with another agent, so say for non-fiction or children's. But we would definitely want to manage everything.
Yeah, and I think you're right, different agencies maybe are slightly different, but it depends on the agency. And I think it sort of sums up what you were saying about you're there, I think, to manage someone's career rather than an individual book. And similarly, at HarperCollins, we do split into the adult trade side, so adult fiction, that's split into fiction and non-fiction, and then a children's side as well. And I definitely primarily publish fiction, but occasionally if your fiction author branches into non-fiction, you might work with a colleague in the non-fiction team, but equally you might publish the book. So Dorno Porter, for example, I'm publishing her non-fiction book this autumn, which actually is about lockdown. It's a diary of it's her lockdown diaries, but it's very much born out of her fiction writing, and so it felt very natural for me to publish it this autumn, but generally it would go to a non-fiction editor through that route.
But I also think, I was going to say, it's clear, you need to be clear about where you want to be launched in the markets. And I think it's important to start in one area of the market. And then once you're established in that area with that particular genre, or then you can kind of branch out, and we're there to help you manage that. But I think it's important to really think about what you want to start out as, because it's such a huge job, you know, from publisher, agent, you know, to get your book to market, to grow you in that area. It takes years. It's not just about the one book. And as you were saying earlier, Kim, you know, we hear about the one book wonders, the big debut that goes really well, but we don't hear about all of the other stories. And you know, our author, we share C.L. Taylor. She started out with commercial women's fiction, did 2 books in that area with a different publisher. And you know, it wasn't until she moved into psychological suspense, domestic suspense, and after the 2 or 3, 4 books, that's when she really started to establish herself and become a bestseller, and all the opportunities would come. But it's such a long journey. But yeah, we're here. Yeah.
I have to say this year for me personally has been particularly special, because a few of my authors have hit #1 this year. But what's been amazing is Dilly Court hit #1 after she's going to be celebrating her 40th book. So her 38th and 39th were both #1 bestsellers for the first time in her career, which is just extraordinary. And the same with Fern Britton. It was on her 9th book we hit #1, which has been really special. So it's it can be a long process, but it's certainly been great journeys, and many different achievements. It's not just about that sort of sales pinnacle. Sometimes there's lots of different elements to it. So just before we wrap up, Maddie, are there any sort of tips you sort of want to leave any aspiring writers to?
I would say persevere. Did I mention this? Read your manuscript out loud once you've finished it. I know that sounds like very daunting, but it really will help you realize if there are areas that are, you know, where if you want to skim over parts, it's probably because the pacing's not quite right. But read it out loud, share it potentially with 1 or 2 people, but don't, you know, it's very subjective, the reading experience. But just keep the faith, because and yeah, submit to multiple agents at the same time. We're all looking, we are hungry, we're looking for new talent, we really are. And now that I've really noticed that if there's something that I want, like there's at least like 5 or 6 other agents pouncing on it as well. So
you and agents open to multiple submissions then?
Yeah, definitely, because you need to find the right agent for you. You need to have that spark, that chemistry. You don't want to be afraid of your agent. You want, it's a friendship, it's a marriage, and I think it will give you the best opportunity if you do. So you can meet them or talk to them on the phone, and you can see it's exactly what we do when we go out to publishers. So
yeah, I think that's just hugely good advice, because I think when you're sort of sitting on your own writing a novel, you don't think about who has the power in the relationship. You think the agent and the publisher have all the power, and actually the writer, your story, it does start with you. We couldn't do what we do without you writing and then submitting the book. And I think that's brilliant, really brilliant advice, and probably a very good place for us to stop. Although I could chat to you all night, so maybe we'll be back for another chapter if we can persuade you, Maddie. But I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kim. That was great. Thank you.
Yeah, so just want to say, just to reiterate, good luck, well done, you're writing, and just make sure you finish the book is my advice. Submit it do your research, submit to an agent, and then hopefully we'll get to share your words with millions of readers. So thank you for listening. This will be on the HarperFiction Presents YouTube channel. We will be back with more behind the scenes. It's really important to us to connect with you as writers, as readers, or as authors. It really is. So thank you, Maddie.
Thanks
for listening to us today.
Good luck, everyone.